I'm Brandi Kruse. Coming up today on Undivided, smile for the camera. We're going to shame some sign-stealing Karens on the show today. How about that? Plus, a Republican congressional candidate says in a news interview that he does not believe devout Muslim Americans should be allowed in Congress. And the Republican Party wonders why it can't win. Also, Governor Gavin Newsom takes a page from Governor Jay Inslee's gas price gaslighting. That and more coming up today on Undivided. Remember, you can support our show for just $5 a month by signing up at undividedpod.com. Oh boy, we're going to have fun today. Yes, we are. Don't we have fun every day? What am I talking about? Hello and welcome to Undivided. I'm Brandi Kruse. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much for your commitment to giving common sense a comeback. A few rapid fire things off the top. A reminder, if you want to get involved before the election, we have become politically involved because that much is at stake. In November, we have two events coming up, one on February. Well, I need a vacation. One on the 19th of October. This weekend, this Saturday, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. in Federal Way will be sign waving and door knocking for not only Dave Reichert, but for the initiatives. And then we're going to be in Stillicum on October 26th from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Sign waving, door knocking for Dave Reichert, the initiatives, and Pierce County exec candidate Kelly Chambers. We had a ton of fun. These are our last two events before the election, so make sure that you are there. Partake in the fun with us. Another rapid fire thing, I just have to note, I have mixed feelings about this. I'm very happy about it, but I have mixed feelings about the Seattle Times motivation because as I've said, I think the Seattle Times editorial board has been the single biggest disappointment of this legislative session because they're hopelessly ideological. They say all year, they release these editorials all year long about crime is bad and drugs are downtown and homelessness is out of control and all these the public school system is deteriorating. And then they turn around during a pivotal election cycle and endorse all the same people who've contributed to all the problems they complain about all year. So it's just ridiculous. For instance, I could go on and on. They endorsed Bob Ferguson, despite complaining about how he's petty, pushy, overly ambitious, lacks transparency, all these things. They endorsed Chris Reykdal for superintendent of public instruction, despite not endorsing him in the primary and saying that he's ruined our education system and hasn't done a good job over the last 8 years. And that's because they don't want to anger the Washington Education Association. They're not going to run afoul of the WEA. There was another Democrat in the race for them to endorse pre-primary, so that gave them a little safety net. But now, oh my gosh, we can't anger the WEA. So now I have said that I think the Seattle Times editorials matter to a certain segment of the voting populace. Casually involve news consumers in Seattle. And frankly, we have to reach them. That's important. And there's a reason why Seattle and King County decide elections, right? So that's why this stuff matters. But I've been saying that in order to appear moderate, they've had to throw some bones here and there. They endorsed 2 of the 4 initiatives, but they took the easy ones where they felt there's the most bipartisan support. So we're going to say vote yes on these and wouldn't take a yes position on ones that were very obvious that they should have. But so I think this is another one of those instances where they're throwing a bone to make themselves appear moderate. I think it's more about themselves than it is about anything else, but hey, we'll take it. The Seattle Times editorial board recommends Jamie Herrera Butler for the Commissioner of Public Lands. Jamie Herrera Butler, of course, a former congressman for Washington's Congresswoman, rather, for Washington's 30, I was trying to be woke, I didn't want to assume, for Washington's 3rd Congressional District. She lost her seat after voting to impeach former President Donald Trump. I'll read a little bit of this, but I think Nicole and I are kind of in agreement. We were chatting about this earlier. It says, voters face a tough choice in selecting the next commissioner of public lands. How best to manage forests has dominated the debates between the candidates. Democrat Dave Updegrove's campaign would bar logging on tens of thousands of acres of trust lands. Republican Jamie Herrera Butler would prioritize increasing restoration work in public forests to reduce wildfire risk in an era of climate change. As such, former U.S. Representative Herrera Butler's candidacy aligns more closely with the approach of Democrats Democrat Hillary Franz, the current commissioner. Franz ramped up the agency's wildfire response and turned to techniques including thinning and prescribed fire to help prevent and reduce out-of-control blazes in the state. The proof of that approach's efficacy was in this summer's skies, or rather largely missing from them. That work should endure, and Herrera Beutler is the best candidate to continue it. Voters should select her for the job in a tight race. Now, I do agree that voters should select Jamie Herrera Beutler, and it's certainly significant for a Republican to get an endorsement from the Seattle Times. But again, I think this is one of those instances. So the Seattle Times a couple days ago released this whole list of all their endorsements to date. And it's just the who's who of leftists, right? And they have just a few little in there, like a race where it's like a Republican on a Republican, I think it was. So like virtually no Republican candidates. But they like to think of themselves as moderate, which I think they've shown they're not. But like, of course, if they're going to endorse one Republican for statewide office, it's going to be the former Congresswoman who voted to impeach Donald Trump. Because then the readers won't say, oh, you're just Trump loving, whatever it is. Like, she's like the safe choice for them. They had to choose one, right? They had to endorse one Republican for a significant race in the state, or else they look just hopelessly ideological. And so they're like, well, let's pick the one who, I mean, she is the most qualified for this job, hands down. But I'm putting myself in their mindset, and they're like, oh, she's the one who voted to impeach Donald Trump. So like, that'll let us off the hook easiest. That's what.
And
this
they do
is.
mention it in the article.
Yeah. So
of
course, because it's like, you know, you can be as far fringe left as you want for the Seattle Times, and that doesn't matter. But in order to get their support as a Republican, you have to be absolutely, unequivocally moderate. Like, if your own party doesn't call you a rhino, they're not endorsing you. And that's kind of how it is in Washington state in general. Like, the media will normalize socialists, like police abolitionists. You can be as far fringe, loony lefty as you want, and the media will downplay your ideas, your dangerous ideas. They'll normalize your behavior, X, Y, Z. But if you're even like 1 degree right of center, it's like, extremist, MAGA, Trump, whatever it is. It's really annoying stuff. And it leads to this sort of, and this is what you see a lot in the media, right? Is like, if you're a Democrat, you get the benefit of the doubt automatically. Your ideas are considered good until they are proven over and over and over again over a long period of time to be very bad. And then maybe you'll get some pushback. If you're a Republican, your ideas are assumed to be bad and evil unless they're proven over and over again to be effective, and you get a chance to prove them effective. Now, I would rather it be, frankly, that your ideas are assumed bad until you prove that they're good. And if they were treating both sides that way, I'm totally fine with that. I think the more skeptical the media is of the government, the better. That's what they're supposed to do. But they give this, like, the party in power gets all this deference. Like, oh, yes, spend 15 years failing on homelessness and spending billions of dollars to no avail. And then maybe we'll start to, like, pepper in a little bit of coverage about how your approach isn't working. And then it's like Republicans get vilified for their ideas, even though their ideas never come to fruition or get voted into law because they're in the minority by a ton. So it's just ridiculous. That's how the media operates. Left good, right bad. And this next story is just going to feed into that. This is why I'm like, for the love of God, the Republican Party in Washington state, it is like death by 1,000 cuts of their own making. And, you know, the party is irreparably broken, in my opinion. You saw that this cycle with the whole semi-bird Dave Reichert thing, the party endorsing a lot of candidates who just didn't have a chance or weren't the kind of Republicans who can win in Washington state. And I get it. Like, there's a big segment of the Republican Party that's tired of compromising on their principles and like tired of watering down their views to placate Seattle liberals. I understand how that's frustrating, but you also have to play a game of, do you want to win or not, right? Do you want to win or not? You can stand by your principles and be hard and fast to your conservatism and not budge an inch, but you'll lose, and that's fine if that's the path that you decide. Or you have to understand we're in a blue state and you have to make little bits of progress if you want to make a difference on anything. So that's, I think, where I just have a fundamental disagreement with the approach of a lot of Republicans in Washington state. So Jared Sessler is a perfect example of this. So the the state Republican Party endorsed Jared Sessler, a businessman, for Congress in the 4th District. So that's the seat currently held by Dan Newhouse. And remember, Tiffany Smiley also jumped in, but she didn't make it past the primary. So you've got Jared Sessler, who's the Trump-endorsed Republican, endorsed by the state party. And then Dan Newhouse, who's been in that seat for some time, but he had the cardinal sin of voting to impeach former President Donald Trump. So there's a big segment of the Republican base that doesn't want him there. And I don't know if it's a big segment, but there's certainly a sizable segment of the Republican base who just will not forgive him for that. And so they keep trying to get him out of office with these further to the right Trump-aligned Republicans. Well, for the love of God, look, let me just say this, because Jared Sessler, I was up till 1:30 a.m. working on a blockbuster story that shall remain secret. And I saw this article, which I'm going to get to in a moment, and I was just going wild on Twitter because this stuff drives me nuts. You wonder why you can't win, and then you've got people who say dumb shit like this. Jared Sessler's always been perfectly nice to me, but he's very fringe, and he says stuff he shouldn't say. And I kind of regret, because I responded to I'm just going to say this. I shouldn't have said it, but somebody responded oh, you're just now realizing he's a moron. And I said, well, I kind of always knew, but that's why I supported Dan Newhouse's campaign. I don't think I should take that back. I don't think Jared Sessler is a moron per se. I mean, that's not the kind of language I usually use, so I probably shouldn't have responded to that in that way. But when you say stuff like this, it's kind of hard for me to feel differently. So Jared Sessler came out in an interview in the Yakima Herald and says he doesn't believe that devout Muslim Americans should be in Congress. In fact, he had so much to say on this topic that they made it a complete breakout section from this entire article, which it's titled, How Dan Newhouse and Jared Sessler Would Lead in D.C. And it gets into all these issues, but, I mean, they were probably really taken aback by what Jared Sessler had to say about Muslim Americans, that they did this whole break-off article off to the side about it. I'm just going to read this whole section to you. It says, Sessler on Muslim Americans. In an interview, Sessler touched on his views on Muslim Americans in Congress. He said he would work with Muslim representatives, although he did not agree with their religious views. There are at least 3 Muslims serving in Congress: Andre Carlson of Indiana, Rashida Tlaib of Michigan, and Ilhan Omar of Minnesota. Sessler emphasized that Muslims are welcome in the United States. Gee, thanks. And he supports Muslim Americans ascending to leadership positions in society. But Sessler said he did not feel that Muslim Americans should be in Congress. Quote, there is no way that a devout Muslim should be in Congress because they can't take the oath of office, Sessler said. Their fundamental belief system is anti-American. What if the majority of Congress was Muslim? How safe and secure would our Constitution be? It wouldn't be, Sessler added. And then the Yakima Herald goes on to add some information. They said the Constitution's First Amendment protects the freedom of religion and gives people the right to practice their religion freely. Asked to clarify his statement, he noted passages from the Quran call for killing non-Muslims. Those words can be misinterpreted and often taken out of context, according to a 2014 Seattle Times column from Aziz Huno, a writer and TV show host. Killing is mentioned, but in very specific circumstances around peace and self-defense. Sessler said that despite his views, he would be respectful and speak with Muslim representatives in Congress. Quote, I would still treat a Muslim representative with dignity because there might be something I need. Good God. Omar and Tlaib have served in Congress since 2018, and Carlson has served since 2008. That's unhinged. I don't think Jared Sessler is a moron. I think that's a moronic statement and a moronic worldview from someone who claims to be a constitutional conservative. And that's where I fall in this. I was surprised. I sent out, no, I wasn't surprised. I sent out a post on X last night and said, this is awful. It is disqualifying and it is unconstitutional. It's an affront to our First Amendment. And that's how I really feel. But he calls himself like a constitutional conservative. I'm sorry, but this is blatantly anti-constitutional. There were a lot of people on X coming to his defense, Muslim, devout Muslims believe in Sharia law and all these things that are totally fly in the face of American values. Look, you can believe that, but at the end of the day, the First Amendment still exists. At the end of the day, we allow, a lot of illegal immigration, but a lot of lawful immigration of people from all over the world into our country. That was sort of the promise of our country, right? Bring us your poor, your tired, your huddled masses yearning to be free. And so America isn't a place that turns away citizens of the world who come here seeking a better life. Some of them we should turn away when they come illegally. But you're talking about the people who are coming to his defense upending what our founding fathers put in place. upending, the First Amendment to the Constitution, which allows people the freedom of religion and the freedom to practice that religion openly. And it's also a gross mischaracterization and generalization of Muslim Americans. I know many Muslim Americans. I have read the Quran because about 7 or 8 years ago, I was provided a English version. I studied Arabic for a little while, but when I was doing that, someone who knew I was studying Arabic gave me an Arabic English version of the Quran. And one of the things I said on X, because he talks about, the Quran, there's a lot of things in the Bible that aren't meant to be taken literally. People can manipulate really any religion to make it to back their extremist agenda. That's like saying that every Christian is a Christian white nationalist who wants like pure-blooded white blue-eyed Americans. That's just a stupid thing to say. To paint all Muslims as extremists who like want to put Sharia law on the American people and are like, it's just a dumb thing to say. It really is. And look, I think we can have a conversation, and I don't think we've shied away from this conversation about, what the flood of immigrants does to the country and all these like conflicting values, conflicting beliefs, conflicting behavior. When you have people who are coming here from third world countries, I mean, the Haitian migrants thing that people say they're eating cats and dogs, which I don't know if we've ever settled whether they were eating cats and dogs. There seems to be some evidence that it happened a couple times, but whatever. You still have people who come in from a totally different world, totally different day to day, and then try to fit in with American life and American values in a way that sometimes can come into conflict. I think that's a perfectly healthy conversation to have. Some people might say that that's like, bigoted. No, I don't think so. I think we should talk about that, right? Because it can, change the fabric of the country. I'm not saying it's necessarily bad, but we have to figure out, can we live together? Can we coexist together? Can we be that like shining beacon, for people around the world who are yearning to be free? But to just say like flat out that Muslim Americans who are devout can't be members of Congress is just anti-constitutional. It's anti-American, frankly. And that's what I would ask people who were defending Jared Sessler is like, because you should read my X replies. A lot of people saying like, here's why he said that, and blah, blah, blah. But I would ask, how would that work in principle? Like in practice, rather. How would that work in practice? Who gets to decide whether a Muslim is too devout to run for Congress? Like, is the government going to decide? Do you get to decide, Jared? Who gets to decide that? Like, what addition to the First Amendment are you going to put in there? Like, you have the right to freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion, unless you're too devout of a Muslim? Like, how in practice do you want to implement that? You see what I'm saying? And then, these are the same people who are like diehard Second Amendment supporters. And you've got like, think of it that way, right? So you've got the left that says, yeah, well, the Second Amendment was never written for weapons of war, high capacity magazines and assault weapons in the hands of civilians. And so that's why they tried to erode the Second Amendment. Well, you're doing the same thing with the First Amendment. Well, the First Amendment was never written for devout Muslims and the Muslims that we're experiencing today who are in the United States. So you're just doing the same thing on a different side of the coin, and you think it's righteous. I just see it as erosion of our constitutional protections and an erosion of what our founding fathers established for this country. So look, it's the right of the voters. It's the right of a democracy to decide whether they want a devout Muslim in Congress. It's not Jared Sessler's job to determine whether too devout of a Muslim would be dangerous for Congress and dangerous for our American institutions. I think it's hateful. I do think it's bigoted. I don't label things that very easily. And I think it makes the Washington State Republican Party look ridiculous because this is someone they've endorsed. Now, I do want to say I reached out to Jim Walsh this morning. I asked him, the chair of the Washington State Republican Party, I said, do you have comment on Sessler's Muslim comment? He said, no. No, but he did add this. I'm encouraged by the growing number of Muslims in Washington who are getting involved in public policy to protect children and families and to defend constitutional rights to property, religious liberty, and free speech. So he has no comment on what Jared Sessler said, but he does want to say he's encouraged by the growing number of Muslims in Washington state who are getting involved in public policy, which, again, Jim, that's just ridiculous. Like, I like Jim. We've had him on the show many times. It's a ridiculous thing to say I have no comment on an endorsed congressional candidate saying, how dumb is that too? Like, sorry, that is moronic. Weeks before an election, like the week ballots go out, you're going to drop that in the Yakima Herald and say, actually, I don't think Muslim Americans should be members of Congress. So look, I get it. Jim has a job to do, but we are really wading deep into the moral hypocrisy. And it doesn't help first of all, I think he'll probably lose. And it just doesn't help the efforts to try to convince voters in Washington state that Republicans aren't extremists. Because they've just been fed that, right? Like time and time and time again, like these are Trump mega extremists. And then you got someone like Jared Sessler who says, and I don't want Muslims in Congress. Well, really hard to beat back that narrative. And then the chair of the party won't even comment on it. So for the love of God, people, let's get some better choices in there. And to be clear, I'm supporting Dan Newhouse's campaign. And that's because I kind of knew that Jared Sessler was a loose cannon who said crazy stuff like this. So anyway. What do you want from me? What do you want from me? Just wild stuff. All right, let's shame some sign-stealing Karens, shall we? Man, so this drives me nuts. So we showed the picture earlier this week of like the Seattle leftists bragging about yanking Let's Go Washington signs out of the ground and throwing them in the garbage. And then they were like one-upping another on X saying, oh, well, add this to your thing. Andrea Suarez signs ripped out of the ground. And we had this whole spiel earlier this week about how, and they were trying to justify it saying, well, they were illegally placed on public right-of-ways they shouldn't have been on. And as I said, that's not it's not your right to remove them. There are in differing laws across cities and counties about their rules, their code for the placement of political signs. Some cities are just fine with it for a certain period of time before and after an election. You can't put them in roundabouts usually or anywhere where they'd conflict with a traffic sign. But if they're in like a green space that's public property, it's usually okay. Obviously, private property is just fine. But those laws can vary city to city. For instance, in the city of Lacey, we were looking at their municipal code for reasons that will become clear. And it said that on public property, you can't have them. You can have them on private property. But the issue is that actually conflicts with some high court rulings that say that if you're in an area that is considered like a public forum, you actually can't ban signs. So you have some of these municipal codes that directly fly in the face of our First Amendment rights and therefore are unenforceable. But even if they were enforceable, and I just want to say this, even if they were enforceable, it's not, civilians aren't deputized to go pull signs out of the ground, okay? You have to contact the municipality whose land it is. If you feel like, hey, those signs aren't supposed to be there, there's a process you have to go through. You can't just go rip them out of the ground and you get to decide. You get to be the decider, the keeper of the laws and say, I think that sign shouldn't be placed there, so I'm going to rip it out and throw it in the trash. No, those signs are property. They're considered property under the law, and there's a process that has to be gone through so the person who put the sign there, if it was illegally placed, have an opportunity to get it back. And just overarching, I think my problem with this is more so like, how triggered are you? How are you a child? How freaking triggered are you that a little 2 foot by 1 foot sign sends you into such a rage that you have to tear it out of the ground? Like, I get it if someone puts it in on your property. Hell yeah, if somebody put a Bob Ferguson sign on my property, snatch. I'll be out in a second. Like, I'm not debating that. But it's on public property somewhere, along a sidewalk, along a road, and you are such a child, you're so triggered that you just have to take it upon yourself to go pull it out. So you know what? If you take it upon yourself to go pull it out, we're going to take it upon ourselves to put you on the Undivided podcast. Welcome to your 15 seconds of fame. Let's start in the city of Lacey. So there is a guy who works for Let's Go Washington. He's been going around. He's been putting signs out in key intersections and areas. And he started to notice that, a lot of them were being yanked or people would, have an issue with him. So he started filming some of these interactions. So I struggled with this first one. I'm going to show you 2 instances today. The second one is far more unhinged. The first lady's a total Karen, but I was going to blur her face. I talked to Nicole about this before the show, only because from the context of the conversation, I feel like she believes that what she's doing is lawful. I mean, she doesn't say anything about opposing the initiatives. I believe that she thinks she's been deputized to determine where signs can be and can't be. Hell, I don't know. Maybe she works for the city of Lacey. Maybe she actually is the person in the city of Lacey who gets to decide or gets to go pull signs out of the ground that are unlawfully placed. I will say, in the clip, we've taken it out, obviously. She gives the guy her address. So we got some information for the person who lives at that address. I did make an effort to get in touch with this woman last night to let her tell me her side of things. I haven't received a phone call back. So anyway, I was going to blur her face because she wasn't like saying she was yanking it out for political differences. But then I watched the clip again today and I'm like, hell no. She's acting like such a petty child that we're gonna give her the attention she clearly so desperately craves. So this is on Orcas Road in Lacey.
Okay, this gal's saying that I can't put the signs up on this road. This is a traditional public forum by the Washington State Supreme Court that has ruled that between the sidewalk and the road is a traditional public forum, ma'am. If you remove that sign, you're committing a misdemeanor. Okay, go ahead. Go for it. Do it.
What, are you going to turn me in?
Yeah. Well, there she goes. What's her name?
I have no idea.
Well, I will know because you know her.
I don't know her. Never seen her before in my life.
Yeah, you have no clue who she is or who I am. My name doesn't matter. They can knock on my door.
Okay, what's your address? Okay, well, that's a misdemeanor.
See ya.
Okay, well,
You want your signs back?
you stole them. I don't.
Oh, okay. See ya.
Yeah, take them off.
Poor dogs. Mom, take me for a walk. And that's just ridiculous. So she seems to have some knowledge of, so she gives her address willingly to a stranger, which is kind of weird, and says, you can come pick the signs up. So that's why I was like, I want to get in touch with her and see, like, does she work for the city? But still, why would you not identify yourself as, if that's the case, which is probably not the case, but I'm just giving her every benefit of the doubt. Why would you not say, hey, I work for the city of Lacey. Here's the municipal code. But again, I don't think that's the case. I think that she thinks she's in the right and literally can enforce the law like she's a police officer. You're not. And that's just childish behavior. Like, how do you not see that? How do you get so triggered by a sign? And I think it shows so much of where our discourse has gotten us. And I know I'm talking a lot about this issue this week, but it's beyond just the sign theft issue. It's about what it says about us as a society. Frankly, what it says about the left in Washington state, that they have so much power and control that they can't even tolerate someone expressing disagreement on a little sign. So anyway, this next one is much worse, and I have no problem in the world shaming this woman. We've cut out a big chunk of the middle because, like, he puts the phone down to continue recording, and she wants to, like, look up. She's fighting with him about the gas ban. So the initiative to make sure that you can continue to choose to use natural gas in your home and business. So she's very clearly angry and taking these signs because she's opposed to the initiative, even though she acknowledges she doesn't know much about it. So we cut out the part where they're kind of chatting about it because you could barely hear it, and we go to the end. But I'm just stunned by the audacity, the hubris of this woman to think that she really believes, you can tell, that she is right and righteous in this moment. It's a pretty long clip, but we got to play it. Here you go.
Oh, here.
You're stealing it.
Here. It's
You're
yours.
stealing my
Seattle,
sign.
by the
Yeah,
way.
it's your sign.
No, you're stealing it.
Are you being serious right
Yeah,
now?
you're stealing my sign. You stole my sign. I'm going to report you to the police.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go
What's
ahead.
your name, ma'am?
What do you think it is?
What do you think it is? I don't know.
You are putting
You're
these
stealing
signs.
my sign.
That's not your land.
It's not your land. It's a public right-of-way, ma'am.
Do you live here in this neighborhood?
Does it matter? It's public right-of-way, miss.
Do you live here in this
Here, put
neighborhood?
it. You want to take it? Take my sign. I'll call 911.
You can call him
Take
right
it.
now.
I will.
You don't live here, do you?
Does it matter?
Why are you here?
Take it. Take it again.
Why are you wanting to stop the
Take
gas
it.
ban?
Because it's my right. It's public. You know, it's free speech.
Sure, but this isn't your neighborhood. You don't live
This is
here.
the state of Washington.
Okay.
I have a free speech to be here, ma'am. What are you against? Are you against free speech?
No.
Then why do you take my sign?
Why are you putting it in my neighborhood?
Why not?
This is my neighborhood.
So what? It's my state.
Where do you live?
What does
Why
it matter?
are you putting signs around a neighborhood that you don't live in?
Why not? This is free speech.
Where do you live? Who
What
sent
does
you
it
here?
matter?
Who sent you here?
I
Yeah.
sent myself here. I choose where I go.
Okay, so why?
Why not?
Okay, so why vote yes?
Why not?
No,
Because
no,
I
tell
think,
me. This is what
I'll
I
tell
really
you
want
why.
to know.
I'll tell you why.
Why yes?
Because I think that the gas ban to stop myself from having gas in my house is going to cost me a whole lot of money.
I don't think that's what the gas ban does.
Well, what do you think it does?
I'm not sure. I'd have to look up. This is what's between us right now, right? The sign, something, an inanimate object is what's standing between us right now, and I think is giving us a really
Well, we're having
Not
a conversation about this.
We are having a conversation, but think about how it started, you know.
Well,
like,
you took my sign down.
Of course I took your sign.
Why?
Because I'm like, I disagree with it.
Well, that doesn't, but we're supposed to have a discussion.
And we are
But you
now,
took my sign.
Well, yes, but that's what I'm saying is when we put these out in front, when you don't see my face, when you just see this,
Yeah?
like that causes a lot, right? It's like a fence. It's a wall. This is the sad part. This is the sad part.
I think it's sad to take my choice away. Aren't you free for choice?
Well, I
Don't
mean,
you want
of
people to have
course.
choice?
Of course.
So why not have a choice for...
Okay, so what would you vote on
gas?
abortion then?
I think it's women's choice.
Great, amazing, high five. Love it. Love to see it. But
Yeah.
I think the thing is what I'm saying and what I read in the legislation is that you would still have a choice and you would not necessarily
No.
be affected. And also because you don't live in
It's
King
a camel's
County,
nose under the tent.
but because you don't live in King County and we're currently in King County, I think that I would just make sure to lobby for this in your own county.
No, I think it's statewide. It's
Well,
a
no.
statewide
Of
issue.
course it's statewide. Of course it's statewide.
Yeah, that's unhinged. Of course I took your sign because I disagree with it. She literally said it. Of course I took your sign because I disagree with it. And the idea that he can't put it up there because he doesn't live in King County for a statewide initiative. And the audacity to stand there and say, this sign is standing between us. It's really this sign. And saying like, I disagree with the policy, but she says at the beginning, well, I need to read more about it. It's really wild stuff. And it's this mentality that I can't even be, and I gotta say, I know this woman. I cannot put my finger on it. I know that
I thought
person.
the same thing. Looks so familiar.
Man, is this somebody we should know? I cannot shake this feeling that I know that person from somewhere. But no freebies here. I don't know. It's somebody. But think of how small and depressing your world has to be. To be that upset when you're confronted with an idea that you don't agree with. Especially when it's just something as non-threatening as a sign. Oh, do you live in this neighborhood? You don't live in this neighborhood. And it's like, that's none of your business. And to pull it out of the ground, this is crazy stuff. I don't know what I do know what's gotten into people. The media divides us. They divide us on, and frankly, the far left and the far right want us to believe that we are just worlds apart on all sorts of stuff, and we should all hate each other and fight all the time. And so it's just, all of this has just like made us lose our freaking minds. That is someone losing their mind who believes, and this is the worst part, that they are doing something right and righteous. Steal signs end up on the Undivided podcast. Who is that woman? Somebody's going to tell us. It's
we did
somebody.
have a comment from Jethro here that says, I need to research this topic, apparently, because in my neighborhood, we are responsible for maintaining that strip of grass, right? And we have talked to people about that, where you can get fined if you don't maintain that little area that's city property.
Yep. Well, that one looks a little different because it's not in front of someone's front yard. It's the yards are fenced in there.
Yeah.
There's grass beyond the fence. Then it's a main street.
Yeah, but I think that whoever owns that, their property is up against it, probably has to mow that.
Yeah, I don't know. In ours, it's the HOA that would have to mow that.
Right.
So again, there's a lot of different policies and regulations that vary county to county, city to city. But I think they're all trumped by the constitutionality of placing a sign in a public place. And that is even more reason why, no, you can't just go yank a sign out of the ground. You're not deputized to do this. There are ways you can reach out. It's property. You're stealing someone's property when you do that. But more than any of that, more than the legality of it, it's really about that mindset of being so triggered by a tiny little piece of cardboard. I mean, get a grip. Touch some grass. It's wild, wild stuff. I know who that person is, and it's going to come to me by the end of the show. All right, coming up next, I apparently didn't rant enough on a segment earlier this week because I've been stewing on it, and I just have to talk about the exact same segment again because I've had all these thoughts about it and I just cannot get over it. First, is that a good tease? I'm going to talk about the same exact thing I talked about on the show a couple days ago. First, the insurance industry is wild right now. If you're handling your insurance on your own, there's no need to, because you could have First Mark Insurance handling your insurance for free. So either you do it or they do it. Either you do it for free or they do it for free. And they're saving you a bunch of time and hassle and the possibility that you choose the wrong insurance or you pay for more insurance than you actually need, etc. So the First Mark challenge is this. And I went through it. You go to them, you schedule some time, they go over your current insurance, talk to them about your insurance needs. They go out, they shop the market of carriers for you. They come back with their recommendation, and you can either join the First Mark family or not. Even if you join the First Mark family, you still never pay First Mark Insurance a dime for their services. They are a wonderful insurance broker who's been doing this in our area for a long time. So be the next First Mark Challenge victory. Take the First Mark Challenge now. It's totally free. Go to firstmarkinsurance.com, firstmarkinsurance.com. The very best part is they work for you, not the insurance companies. All right. I have pent up anger from a segment we did 2 days ago. Yeah, that's how long I stew on things. So let's get to it in our segment, Unbelievable. Bloop. All right. So the media's lost its mind. But we talk about, the ways that the media either intentionally or unintentionally tries to manipulate or does manipulate people's emotions around issues. I think it comes from an inherent bias that they think they're hiding, but their choices show otherwise. So earlier this week, I talked about this Como News article, and it's actually an Associated Press Wire article. And so since it's a Wire article, I think Fox 13 put the exact same thing up. But these stations have the option to take them down if they don't meet their editorial standards. So by leaving them up, it tells me that they're just fine with them. So this was the Como News article I ranted about. Washington's landmark climate law hangs in the balance in November, and it talks about the initiative 2117 to repeal the Climate Commitment Act. Remember, we're going to vote yes, pay less. And they included this gallery of 7 images that have all these coal-fired plants just releasing, oh my God, look at that, the sky's orange. Oh, you can't even see the sun. Oh my God, look at that, the sky looks like it's on fire. This is horrible. Who would want more of this? This is awful. And I pointed out on the show that not a single one of those images was from Washington State. There was a couple of them are from other states. One of them is from Poland, like a coal plant in Poland. And so to me, it just seemed really disingenuous to talk about Washington's climate law to reduce emissions and then to use all these pictures from everywhere else and not one from Washington. So I want to elaborate on this a little bit because I did a little research. So first of all, Washington only has one remaining coal plant, and it is barely operational. In fact, they're transitioning to natural gas. So I looked into this, and back in 2011, former Governor Christine Gregoire actually signed the agreement for TransAlta Energy Company to close what was, even at 2011, the state's last remaining coal plant. So this is before the CCA was even a whisper, before the Climate Commitment Act was this big controversial policy. 10 years before that, Washington State was moving away from these coal plants under former Governor Christine Gregoire. And they set forth a plan to have this last remaining plant, the TransAlta, cease operations as a coal plant in 2025, which is next year, which presumably they're on track to do. So again, when I go back to those pictures, I think for me, and at the time when I did the segment, I didn't realize that coal plants were just a thing of the past in Washington. So when I look back at the pictures that Como News published, it's even worse. Because what they're essentially saying with that image, and those images when someone goes to this, is this is the future in Washington State if we don't keep the Climate Commitment Act. But in truth, Washington State hasn't really ever looked like that. But Washington State only has one coal power plant left, and it's going to be out of service next year as a coal plant. So they want you to believe the intent of the Associated Press article, in combination with the imagery, is to make voters believe that those skies, those smog-filled, burning skies, are the fate of our state if we repeal the CCA. That's shameful. That's a shameful editorial standard. That's shameful gaslighting for voters. Long before the CCA, the state was doing away with power plants that look like that. We don't have we don't have those scenes in our state. So why on earth would you use not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, not 6, 7 images showing this horrible, horrific sky of pollution and saying, oh, the Climate Commitment Act is in peril, when the two things have nothing to do with one another. Why else except to mislead and to gaslight and to lie to voters? It's really shameful stuff, and it's still up right now. I can't even imagine making an editorial decision like that. But we've seen, I mean, who was it? Cairo 7? We did this story on the fact that they literally plagiarized word for word an Attorney General press release and posted it as a news story. I guarantee that's still up today. Because, I mean, like a week or two after it, I should look. They hadn't changed it. The public shaming over just copy pasting a press release from the candidate for governor wasn't enough for them to get it taken down, because they'll criticize everyone else's decisions, everyone else's behavior. That's what the news is about. But they won't accept an ounce of criticism about their own decisions. And that's why the media is failing, fundamentally. All right. Speaking of the failing media, should we do round 2? Second round of Unbelievable. Maybe it's believable now. I don't know. The norm. Boop. All right. So the Seattle Times editorial board said vote no on 2109 to repeal the capital gains tax. They did, however, let our friend Vijay Boyapati publish an opposing op-ed. Here it is. Vote yes on Initiative 2109. Repeal Washington's capital gains tax. And as I told Vijay when he appeared on Sundays with Subscribers a couple weeks ago, I think he is just a fantastic spokesperson for this. He's a former Google engineer. He's an entrepreneur. And he's just a really reasonable guy. So I was glad the Seattle Times published this from him, except there's one problem. So the Seattle Times, according to Vijay, edited out a key line in the op-ed he submitted, and Vijay is not very happy with it. So the line that was cut, it was reworked a little bit by the Seattle Times, but the line that was cut said this: currently, the capital gains tax applies to profits over $262,000 from the sale of assets. However, Senate Bill 5335 was introduced this year to lower the tax threshold to $15,000 and increase the tax rate from 7% to 8.5%. That line that they cut out of his editorial without asking him before they published it, to me was the most important line in the entire piece. Because again, their entire argument for the tax on capital gains is this is just the rich. This is just the richest 2%. When they had an example just this year of already trying to drive down who would pay. So it just seems odd that they would cut out what is one of the most significant arguments against the capital gains tax. So Vijay wrote on X when he saw that, he said, "I'm deeply disappointed that my original text was edited without my permission by the Seattle Times to remove a crucial section explaining that proponents of the capital gains tax have already created new legislation to drastically lower the threshold at which the capital gains tax applies. By censoring my op-ed, the Times is responsible for hiding crucial information from Washington's citizens that erode their ability to make an informed decision." Now, again, let me give the Seattle Times every benefit of the doubt. So I have, before I became a staunch critic of theirs and said they were the biggest disappointment of the 2024 election cycle, I have submitted op-eds that have been published in the Seattle Times, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 of them in the past, after I left Fox 13. And to give them a little bit of, again, the benefit of the doubt, there are rules for submitting op-eds. So they make it very clear that they might edit your content for clarity or context. That, for instance, if I would write things in my op-eds that they had questions about, there is an editing process. They don't just take your words verbatim and put them on there without any changes. Usually it's sort of a mutual back and forth, and they might change some things. There's also a word limit length, where they say you have to keep your op-ed to 650 words. So I thought, well, maybe he submitted an op-ed that went way over the word count and they just had to choose things to cut. But Vijay published his unedited op-ed and it was 686 words. Okay, that's 36 words over the limit. And so the final version they published was 638 words. So it was under that. But the thing is that the Seattle Times has never been hard and fast about the 650 word limit. I've submitted an op-ed to the Times that had more than 650 words. And that tiny little, again, it was one sentence, 2 short sentences that got cut. To me, that's really 686 words versus 650. That's the difference that that would make for your readers. It's a tiny little paragraph, but it's a paragraph that added so much context to truly understand what they're trying to do with the tax on capital gains. So if you're telling me that cutting, 36 words out of the op-ed was more important than giving voters that context, then I don't know what to say to you. I tend to think that the reason was more so that the Seattle Times opposed it, and they don't want people to know that this isn't about taxing the rich. This is about turning it into a de facto income tax for every single Washingtonian. So, yeah, and it's not the only example lately. There's been a lot of call outs in the media of edited interviews. That's one of the reasons we don't really edit interviews on this show. I mean, you'll notice the Sunday show, we just sort of, and that's what we tell people, treat it like a live interview because we're just going to air it back unedited. Occasionally, we go so long with someone that, like, if we had, meaningless banter or something, we might cut it out. But, I firmly am against editing. We try to keep interviews to the length that we need them to be. And especially if it's kind of like a hostile interview, so to speak, where you're like, maybe you have, like Nick Brown, for instance. I wouldn't have edited, I would have been extra careful not to edit Nick Brown's interview, even for length, because this is someone who we don't agree on a lot of stuff. So any editing might have been seen as like de facto impropriety. And I just don't like that. So I don't like editing people's words. And this is starting to sort of become more apparent how much the media actually engages in this. I don't know if it's nefarious, but I can't give the media the benefit of the doubt anymore. I really can't. So I just have to assume it is because it happens so much. So just as an example, on 60 Minutes, Kamala Harris did this interview on 60 Minutes, and there were some longer versions of it that aired, but in a lot of other places, they took these long word soup answers she gave and edited them down so tight that she actually seemed coherent. When if you listen to her full answer, it was like blah, 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 word soup. And people, we have the internet now. Like, people catch these things like, hey, you edited this answer down, but when you compare the two, she looks totally incoherent and unintelligent in one of them. And the other one, she looks like she knows what she's doing. So here's an example of 60 Minutes editing.
But it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
We're not going to stop pursuing what is necessary for the United States to be clear about where we stand on the need for this war to end.
But it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
Well, Bill, the work that we have done has resulted in a number of movements in that region by Israel that were very much prompted by or a result of many things, including our advocacy for what needs to happen in the region.
Like what? It's that thing where she's saying a lot of words, but she doesn't say anything. Now, when you cut that out, man, she looks like a strong, decisive leader. Like, look, so there's a huge difference there. And it's really irresponsible to do that in any context, but particularly when you're talking about a presidential candidate who doesn't sit down for a lot of interviews, where there's concerns about her knowledge and expertise on everything, but foreign affairs in particular, to cut it down from an entity like 60 Minutes, because that was a great 60 Minutes interview. I thought the journalist did a very, very good job. He asked her a lot of hard questions. So I have a hard time, this is, and again, I refuse to the media, I don't give them the benefit anymore because they've just done things so many times. This was the decision of a producer to say, hey, that cut's too long, chop it down. And just cut out that nonsense in the middle. So they probably didn't even think or care to think about how it actually helped her. I really believe that's probably the case.
Well, and it's kind of terrible TV the way that she does that. So yeah, as a producer, you're like, ooh, I want this to sound better.
Right.
And she sounds terrible.
She sounds awful. Well, it's like on radio, and I'm sure you experience this. If you've got a guest that's very breathy, you're going to cut out pauses because you're like, that's just boring for people. Mm-hmm. Now, if it's a political candidate, that might show that they're searching for answers. You're not going to cut that out. You treat it very differently. Like if I have someone, who on the show and taping an interview, and it's I'm just trying to think of an example. It's just someone like a crime victim, I don't know, right?
Sure.
Nervous. And they're like, oh, can I, try that answer again? I might be inclined to just let them.
Yeah.
Sure, that's not hurting anyone, right? Mm-hmm. But if it's a politician, no, you don't get to try the answer again. I'm asking you questions. So it's just wild. So the same thing happened to Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. So he was so concerned about this, he actually set up, so he's doing this remote interview with, again, CBS. And he was so concerned, probably after watching the 60 Minutes thing, he set up his own camera to record the taping on his end. And he had that recording, and it did not match up with what they ended up airing on CBS.
So that's a different accounting than this 2% you say was distributed.
Yeah, so they've obligated some funds, but they've only distributed 2%. The rescue and recovery effort's still going on, and then we address the rest of it.
So that's a different accounting than this 2% you say was distributed.
Yeah, so they've obligated some funds, but they've only distributed 2%. And when I was there on the ground, and you should go, I mean, bring the cameras and talk to the people there. They'll tell you, don't take politicians' words for this or the administration's word. Talk to the people there on the ground. They had not been provided the resources almost 2 weeks out from the storm that they desperately needed. And when I was there, 13 days post the storm hitting that state, people are still being rescued. They're stuck in the higher elevations in the mountains because the roads are down and all the rest. So they need every available resource and all hands on deck. The rescue and recovery effort's still going on, and then we address the rest of it.
I mean, that seems pretty relevant, right? She's questioning something he said, and he's giving her his personal experience on the ground and talking about the failed response of the Biden administration. And that's what gets cut out. And when you're the media and trust in you is at an all-time low, you have to go above and beyond to show that you're above board, that you're not trying to do things for bias reasons or to help political candidates, even if that's not your intent. You have to have the self-awareness to understand that if people find out what you edited out, and you thought it was just fine, but they're going to immediately assume that you did it to help Joe Biden, to help Kamala Harris. And if you want to regain trust, stopping the selective editing is a really, really good place to start. Unbelievable. All right, we're going to dive into some conversations on housing coming up next. And then Governor Gavin Newsom, man, him and Jay Inslee are like the same. They're just a clone. One's like more charming. Well, is he? Schmarmy.
Yeah, they're pretty similar.
They're pretty similar.
I don't know,
well,
it's hard to
suave.
separate.
You know, Gavin Newsom is like
Just
like
an age
lipstick on a
difference.
pig, right?
Yeah.
Where he's like delivers it
You just
better.
think he's a little cuter.
Oh, he's
A little more
kinda-
attractive.
No, Jay Inslee's not bad
he's
looking.
not.
They're both handsome. How do we devolve into this? I was criticizing them. Gavin Newsom sells his stuff with a smile. He's like a used car salesman.
Yes.
Jay Inslee, I don't know how he sells anything because he fumbles through everything he tries to say. But anyway, we're going to talk about that coming up next. First, if you're thinking about selling your home, reach out to our friend Wes Jones of sellwithwes.com. He's been doing this for a long time. There's some real estate agents, they come in and out, or they just start. He's been doing this since like before the downturn and all that. He's gone through every crazy time in the housing market that there has been in. He's still here, and that's because he's very good at what he does. And he gets results for his clients, like retired Seattle police officer Mike Boggs, who called Wes when he retired from SPD and decided to sell his home of 30 years to move to Arizona.
So the concerns were, is it presentable enough to sell quickly to get the price we want? Wes came out and met with us, and we told him what our concerns were. And he mentioned the concierge service, and we did take advantage of it. It was such an easy process. Wes is a really great guy, and his team is amazing, and the communication is great. So the whole process was great.
Yeah. And he was obviously very pleasantly surprised with how fast it sold, living his best life down in Arizona. Good for him. So get in touch with Wes Jones, sellwithwes.com. He'll start by giving you a free market analysis. You can see how well your home is positioned. And you can also use their free calculator on their website to see how much your home is worth. It might be worth more than you think. Sellwithwes.com, a better way to sell your home. All right, let's talk about housing issues. So I know that our focus is on the election, right? But a month and a couple days after the election, or 2 months after the election, we're going to be in a new legislative session. And depending on what happens in November, man, it could be rough. We already know that Democrats have some pretty solid majorities. God forbid they get a supermajority in the Senate. God forbid Bob Ferguson's in the governor's office. You're going to see things like the end of qualified immunity for officers. You're going to see them try to push rent control through again, pay unemployment benefits for striking workers. So November will tell us just how emboldened the progressive wing of the Democratic Party is going to be at the start of the legislative session. And I'll tell you, I'm already having many panic attacks over it. But housing is one of the big things. I told you guys, was it last week, Nicole, or the week before? Gosh, every week seems like a year. I was at Engage. It's a conference held by the Rental Housing Association of Washington. Since they're an advertiser on our show, they invited me to come and do a media panel about how the media covers housing issues. But there were a ton of politicians there on both sides of the political aisle. And I asked Sean Flynn with RHA to come on today to talk a little bit about, did you come away from this conference with what the concerns are for the legislative session, or what your priorities are going to be to try to help some of these landlords who are really struggling under the terrible policies in our state? Sean, welcome back to Undivided.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me at your conference. I was just like, it was nice to see so many people who see these issues reasonably in the same place talking about them.
Yeah, it was great. Housing is such a difficult topic. Not everyone sees it exactly the same. But what I thought was great about our event, which was called Engage 2024, at the Maidenbauer Center last week, was that we had folks coming together to really talk about these large problems and come up with solutions that would work.
Yeah, I'm curious what came out of it, because, there were Democrats who were scheduled to speak. There were Republicans who were scheduled to speak. So a little bit of bipartisanship. For you guys, the legislative session is going to be here before we know it. I guess let's start with kind of problems. What was discussed in terms of concerns about where legislation might be going?
Oh, in terms of legislation, our big issue on the horizon is a possible rent control bill that I guess I'm optimistic to say possible. We will see a rent control bill in 2025. The question is whether the state believes this is going to be good policy or not. And I think that one of the resounding answers from everyone who was involved in the conference, either built, financed, operated housing, was that rent control puts a major effectively what it does, it takes all the problems we currently have in our housing market and makes it permanent.
Yeah.
So all of the problems that we're having with our eviction backlogs, our lack of being able to control tenancies, to the financing side, to what projects pencil and don't pencil, to investor side, folks just don't want to be investing in a real estate market with rent control. So rent control hurts supply, but it also hurts operators. It's a bad option.
Look, I think that the tighter the stronger the Democratic majorities get, then they go in there and they say, let's get rid of anyone who dissents at all. So then we've got sort of this monolith, right? And there's, for instance, Larry Springer, who I would consider to be a more moderate Democrat, who has been more favorable on some of the housing issues. He's in like the battle of his life against a very progressive primary challenger who explicitly supports rent control. So what are you guys doing now as opposed to, legislative session ahead? Can you do anything as an entity? Are you doing anything as an entity to try to keep people like Larry Springer in their seats?
Well, yeah. So RHA supports a lot of Democrats, and they're moderate Democrats, and oftentimes against progressive challengers. Because you're right, Brandi. What often happens is that when a moderate Democrat votes against the party, they'll run a ultra left candidate against that person. A great example was Mark Mullet. Mark Mullet in his last Senate election had a very progressive challenger, and the governor, a sitting Democratic governor, campaigned against him. And so I think that one great thing people can do is donate to the Rental Housing Association's PAC. We actually give out a substantial amount of money to Democrats and some Republicans, but a lot of our money goes directly to those moderate Democrats to try to keep them in those seats. At RHA, we're about sensible housing policy. Our members want to house people. And we want sensible folks who will vote to keep people housed and keep the housing economy open and working for everyone.
Republicans need to stop sitting out D-on-D races or doing write-ins. That's totally counterproductive. Republicans should be helping Larry Springer. I always want to say Jerry Springer, obviously. Larry Springer keep his seat in the 45th, and so they've got to get involved in those races. So when you guys were all gathered for your conference, did you decide on sort of a policy agenda for 2025?
So RHA has been working on a ledge agenda that not everyone is on board with quite yet, but I imagine they will be, and soon. That really goes after the problems that real people are facing from the housing crisis. Look, no one argues that we don't have a housing crisis anymore. And we're not even arguing really the numbers. Most people in the know will say it's about 1 million units short today, that the state's about 1 million units short. Now, that could be 1.1, that could be 1.2, but no one's arguing it's 500,000. We are in a major supply crisis. And that supply crisis has real effects on people's lives, real folks' lives. And so the RHA has put together, working with some key House representatives, to put together what will eventually be a bipartisan plan for a couple key bills. The first one is going to be what we call the TAP bill, the Tenant Assistance Program bill. And that bill is to provide short-term rental assistance to folks who need it due to a crisis or something else going on in their lives. Those would be a short-term voucher that would work. It would be in small sums of money, $600, $800. What COVID taught us was that early money and small amounts of it can save you tens of thousands of dollars down the road. So if we just had $1,200 for 3 months, we could avoid spending $60,000 in state and housing provider resources. Mm-hmm. If you push that person through the eviction process. So that program, I think, is a great program, and hopefully that gets lots of legs. We also have what's called a harmonization bill to try to lend some rationality to the hodgepodge of rental regulations across the state. There's no reason we should have one set of housing rules in Burien and one set in Federal Way, and then a third set in Tukwila, and yet a fourth set, and on and on and on. We should have one code to rule them all. What else do we have in that package? We've got we've got a what we call a tenant safety and eviction reform bill that would fast track folks who are posing an imminent threat to either a danger or a quiet enjoyment issue, right? Noise, that sort of thing. Fast track to a judge rather than languishing in line with the rest of the eviction backlog that currently sits at about 18 months in King County. So we have a package of bills that we are hoping will solve the immediate problems of the lack of supply. That is a function of the fact that we haven't built enough housing for like the totality of my life in this state. And hopefully that time we can also pass some supply bills so we can start building some supply so we can see some of these needs ease. But if those things don't take hold, the rent control will take all of these problems and make them permanent, because that supply will never come back online.
Yeah. Can I just ask, you said one code to rule them all. Are you a Lord of the Rings fan?
I read a lot in junior high. I didn't have a lot of friends, so.
Well, I just watched the trilogy the other day for no reason, 14 hours or so of TV. So,
Yeah, no, it's good, right? It's, all you need to know is in Tolkien and The Godfather.
100%. I will just point out, we do this partnered segment, but it doesn't change what we do editorially. And on the TAP thing, I think I've told you this before, I'm all in favor of it. I'll advocate for it unless the other resources don't go away. I don't like the idea of adding this buffer for people if we continue to have, these $50,000 checks being written to slum, tenants or whatever it is. So I'd like to see how that plays out before I get excited about it. But I feel like you guys are kind of on the same side as I am on that, right? Like not and, it's got to be an or, right?
Right. And the idea of the TAP money is that it avoids the whole situation to begin with.
Yeah.
Shockingly enough, unless you're a person who's taking advantage of the system, right? And those folks, admittedly, are few and far between, but terrible when that happens, right? But for most folks, your average resident in the state of Washington, if you're $1,200 behind one time, you can get yourself into a situation where that sort of spirals. Yeah. Okay, for a lot of different reasons. And then the way we set the laws is that drags us into an eviction court proceeding, and then lawyers get involved, and the whole thing drags out, and it ends up costing tens of millions of dollars. And if we just had $1,200 in a voucher at day one, none of this would have happened. Yeah.
So, a lot to anticipate, worry about heading into the legislative session. Fully in support of this voucher idea that he's talked about on the show. Again, it can't be an and. We have to stop doing the things that aren't working. And I know RHA wants to as well, like this ridiculousness of the Housing Justice Project, insane. And then do things that actually work, or else you're just taking more money from us, and the problem's not getting any better. So anyway, that segment is part of our partnership with the Rental Housing Association of Washington. We're going to lead this up all the way to the legislative session to keep attention on these important issues that are impacting not only landlords, but housing supply. And also just common sense. Like, some of this stuff is so dumb. It's like, how would these policies even exist? But we're going to keep our eye on the numbers in the state Senate, because if there's a supermajority there, they might have the votes they need to push through things like rent control. All right. And if you're a landlord, make sure that you become a member of RHA, rhawa.org. I mean, they have your back. It's like $260 a year. You really should do it. Okay, let's get to some national news really quick. This just struck me because, one of my big frustrations has been on the Climate Commitment Act, Governor Inslee lying about it. Like, level set with people about the fact that it's going to increase gas prices. And he refused to do that. And then they jumped like 50 cents. And that's significant for people who are on a tight budget. Well, down in California, Governor Gavin Newsom doing the exact same thing. So California's Air Resource Board, this is from Ashley Zavala. She's a local reporter down there. So they're going to update their low carbon fuel standard, LCFS. And starting in 2025, there are some estimates that it's going to increase gas prices there by 47 cents a gallon, which California often already has the highest gas prices in the nation. So they came out, the California Air Resource Board, with that estimate. And then, of course, people were like, whoa. So they walked it back. Sound a lot like Washington State, like, oh, no, we don't mean that. No, it's not going to increase gas prices or whatever it is. So this reporter, Ashley Zavala, asked Gavin Newsom about this, and just like, again, like, just tell people the truth. Like, if you support the policy, just tell people the truth and be transparent. Here's what he said.
It's in an attempt to be able to explain to California drivers, just to level set their expectations at the pump as this rulemaking process begins. The LCFS process is underway, as you have said, but in less than a month, they're scheduled to vote on that. Yep. And CARB, at the moment, the LA Times reported last week that they're not providing an update to the estimate that it might cost consumers. And I reached out to CARB on Friday. I have yet to hear back. I asked them, is that true? Do you not plan on publicly updating people on what the potential cost at the pump could be? So do you think it's fair to California drivers for people to not know what those LCFS standards mean at the pump?
Well, LCFS is not a brand new construct. It's been well established for years and years and years and years. There's a process that's consistent to the process they've had in the past. They put up some estimates. They put up updated estimates, so they have been transparent in that respect. To the degree that they should provide more, I'm for more transparency, absolutely, from that perspective. So to answer your question, I think more is better. I mean, that's the spirit of this special session. It's the spirit of why I'm here today signing this bill. But I do think it's important to talk about the substance and the merits of LCFF and how it's made a big impact on our low-carbon green growth agenda in the state of California. It's helped to pave the way to having 7 times more green-collar jobs than we have fossil fuel jobs. I'll repeat that, 7x more jobs in this sector. It's one of the reasons guys like Elon Musk and others have become so damn successful. Is because we've set price signals, we've created markets, we've created opportunities for investment. We're the #1 manufacturer in the state for a reason. We continue to be the envy of the world in these policies, and LCFS is a big, big part of that.
Just to quickly clarify, so you're the boss.
Well, I'm not the dictator.
Well, but will you direct
Just ask
CARB?
the Coastal Commission.
Will you direct CARB then to provide an estimate before that vote?
I think it's important to be, I think you heard exactly what I said. I'll repeat it. I think it's important to be transparent.
Yeah, important to be transparent, but not right now. Important to be transparent, not here. We'll do it some other time, some other place, and then meanwhile, in 2 months, you could have Californians who are already paying a lot for gas, paying 50 cents more a gallon because people like Gavin Newsom, Jay Inslee, they really don't care about that. They care about pushing an agenda, bringing a lot of money in that goes to their allies and their cronies. You guys, I'm just saying, I'm not saying it's her. But so I was like, I know the sign thief. Can you play that? Go back to the Seattle sign thief, right? I want to play just the part where he asks her what her name is.
Oh, here. You're stealing it.
Here, it's yours.
You're stealing my sign.
Yeah, it's your sign.
No, you're stealing it.
Are you being serious right now?
Yeah, you're stealing my sign. You stole my sign. I'm going to report you to the police.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go
What's
ahead.
your name, ma'am?
What do you think it is?
What do you think
right
it
there.
is? I don't know.
What do you think it is? Doesn't that come across to you like somebody famous would say that? Like,
Right.
you should know my name. And I was sitting here and I was like, I swear to God, I know that person. Like, I know that person. I was like, it will come to me. And I was like, doesn't she look like the chick from Unsellable Houses?
I'm not sure.
It's a Seattle-based, it's a Washington-based show. I'm not saying it is, but maybe that's
why she looks so
maybe
familiar.
that's why she looks so familiar, because she kind of looks like the chick from that show. Maybe we'll have to reach out and say, hey, is this you? Somebody Google the thing on her hat. Cowgirl Grainberry Point Reyes? I don't know. Anyway, kind of looks like her. I'm not saying it is, but it's a doppelganger for sure. And maybe that's why, because I like that show. Maybe that's why. But I think she also has a twin sister, right, who's on the show with her. Is it her twin or just her best friend? Because they both look a lot alike, but the twin or sister has dark brown hair.
Yeah, I don't think they look that much alike. So if they're definitely fraternal, if they are.
No, I think the sisters look alike. Can you just pull that picture up again? Am I crazy? Okay. They look a lot alike.
I mean, there's definitely an eye thing. It's the eyes, I think, that look very similar.
Come on.
It's very similar.
All right. Like, look, I'm not, just for the lawyers, I'm not saying that the unsellable house lady is the sign Karen.
She just resembles.
Combined with the whole, what do you think it is? What do you think my name is?
Right.
Quite interesting, isn't it?
It is.
I will tell you, by tomorrow's show, I feel like I'll have gotten to the bottom of this, because I'm going to do so much freaking sleuthing. But anyway, maybe just a doppelganger. I knew I'd come up with, maybe I do like that show. So now I'm not going to watch it if she's a sign Karen. All right. Let's get to our daily sanity check. Or not our sanity check. Wow, I just wanted to leapfrog. Daily subscriber show poll. I asked you guys this because we're going to talk about it in our sanity check today. Does former President Donald Trump's age, 78, concern you? I asked subscribers on Patreon, Locals, and X. Yes or no? And look, I think that's a fair question, right? You know, Biden's age was very concerning, but to me it was more so his fitness, not the actual number. So 81% of you on Patreon are saying no. Jackie, I have no love for either candidate, but age concerns me because I have seen it with my family, how a loved one can be mentally fit and then they hit a certain age and it's like a quick or sudden decline. As of today, I still have not decided on the presidential race and infuriate everyone who hears me say it. Bill Swick says, no, I'm over 70 and many of my friends are over 80. They're all clear-headed and wise. That sounds like good credentials to me. And I think that's one of the things is like, to Biden, it wasn't really his age. To say it was his age is oversimplifying things. It was his clear mental decline. I mean, Dave Reichert's 74. Dave Reichert's in better shape than anyone I know. One time I was at an event, Freedom Fest. Did I ever tell you about this? Mike, my husband, went and got us food at Freedom Fest from the food trucks because I was up and down on stage. So, of course, he brings me back this, like, carb meat thing. It was like French fries and then like brisket on top of it with this little gravy, and I'm sitting in this backstage tent eating it, and Dave Reichert's looking at it like, I'm like, you don't eat stuff like this, do you? He's like, no. I was like, well, that's why you look like that. So it, it's age it really is to me just a number, although I understand the point Jackie's making. Brian says old dogs cannot learn new tricks. I think the president needs to be an adaptable individual. Okay, I see that. Shirley, it might concern me if he picked a horrible running mate, but I don't hate J.D. Vance. Mike H., he's 78 years old. Just because he has most of his faculties today doesn't mean he'll have them in 2 or 3 years. Look at 2019 Biden versus, that's a very good point. 2019 Biden versus 2022 Biden. I mean, I still had some concerns about Biden. He was slipping, obviously. Trump, he's very there mentally.
Right.
But
we had signs before. And all of the signs that they're pointing to for Trump have been manipulated. We've learned.
Right.
That they're manipulating these videos to make him seem lost.
Well, yeah, there was this one video that even like Harris's like campaign army was putting out that Trump appeared like lost on stage. No,
he wrote, I hope he's okay.
I hope he's okay. Mm-hmm. He was doing that because there was 2 medical emergencies in the crowd and they were giving them time to be dealt with. So he's just stood up there like dancing to music.
Well, he actually like asked them to play songs that he liked. It was like he took it as this opportunity to play DJ. So he was sitting there dancing and they're like, oh, he looks lost.
Yeah.
It was ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely ridiculous. All right. Let's get to some other questions and comments. Actually, yeah, let's get to some other questions and comments before our sanity check, but it will be on that topic. Stephanie Brushwood, hello from Lacey. Stacy, I saw people over I-5 off Sleater Kinney Road holding Dave Reichert signs. He has my vote. I love it. I got to be honest, though. I hate the over the freeway sign waivers. I think it's so dangerous. It's such a distraction. It's such a distraction at highway speeds.
Aren't they all distractions?
No, I mean, if you're going 25 miles an hour down a thoroughfare, it's like whatever. Stacy, hello, all you great people. I heard from a neighbor that my initiative signs helped him decide to vote yes. He said I looked them up and they just made the most logical sense. Good. Adorable, deplorable. Honestly, I hate all signs everywhere, but I'm all for putting up signs on your property. Yeah. Matthew Cook, I still see semi-bird signs, and they're supposed to be taken down 10 days after the election where you lose. Matthew Cook, if you believe the no position is correct and popular, then why would you feel yes signs are a threat? Yeah, that's like the whole like school choice thing. It's like, we think public schools are the best option, but we don't want to give anyone a choice to see what they actually pick. Haynes, as a former 12-year-old, as a former 12-year-old, I can relate to this behavior. Yeah.
Right.
And just this fundamental belief, you saw it, that she believed she was right. She believed fundamentally in her heart, like, I am doing something right.
And everyone else is stupid.
God.
Like, anybody that could think differently, stupid.
I mean, it better not be the house lady, because her business will take a hit if she's doing stuff like that. But again,
Kathy says it's not her. Her voice is very distinct, and you kind of said the same thing.
I did, yes. That her voice seems more like nasally in the show. Mm-hmm. So just
maybe she was sick.
An unfortunate doppelganger. We're still going to ask her if it's her.
Okay.
Just because, unless there's somebody else I'm thinking of. It's somebody famous though, because.
Somebody with a little fame.
Because the way she, what do you think it is?
Yeah.
Our army will get to the bottom of this. We'll post the video. We'll get to the bottom of it. All right. Tim, have you posted a list of initiatives and candidates to vote for? If not, will you please? Yes. So just vote yes on the initiatives. But yeah, I'll push out some stuff. Brett Hammond, every time something's racist, sexist, offensive, it's always a liberal white lady screeching about it with her $7 Starbucks. Yep. Very true. Rick Eckert, $5 super chat. I have to disagree with Sean on one rental code statewide. Not all municipalities are equal under the GMA. Some local control is needed to address this. Yeah, in terms of like bringing parity to rules for rentals, etc. Bill Biz, $20 super chat. I really believe that the sign stealers and the left in general, locally and nationally, have no problem suppressing opposing speech and lying in support of their goals by any means necessary. Beware October surprises. And
exactly. If you believe, or if you see any ad, you will believe they have no limits.
Well, there's no limits, right? They don't care. And then they want to say that the right is the ones that are a threat to democracy. But the whole by any means necessary, this is a sentiment that part of the faction of the Republican Party that I tend to disagree with in Washington State, that they share. And I see more and more what they're saying is like, the Democratic Party doesn't try to moderate itself. The Democratic Party doesn't pull punches. The Democratic Party doesn't have issues being extremist liars. And it's like, then we want to run like campaigns that are above board and all of this. And what do we do? What happens? We lose, right? So I understand their frustration, but I don't think going further to the right is the answer. You just live in a state where the Democratic Party's in control, so they can get away with more of that stuff. They have this huge infrastructure and ecosystem where they feel protected in it. And they have all this money and all, so. Dano, my mom is 93 and she has won 11,000 games of Candy Crush.
That's impressive.
Holy smokes. Well, then she can be president. That's the barometer. 10,000 games of Candy Crush. I need to see 1,000 more to make my decision. All right, we'll get to our sanity check next. First, a lot going on in our country, a lot at stake in November. You need to make sure that you have someone managing your retirement portfolio who is looking at all that stuff and adjusting accordingly. And that's what Zach Abraham and his team at Bulwark Capital do. Zach, along with Bulwark's analysts, track current events closely so they can adjust to market risks every day to help shield your portfolio as much as possible. Risk management is Bulwark's #1 focus because you only get one retirement. You've worked hard for it. You've dreamed about it. You know what you want it to look like, and you want to make sure that you have enough money to make it a reality. So learn about Bulwark's risk management strategy in their free Common Sense Investing Guide. Get yours now by calling 866-779-RISK or go to knowyourriskradio.com. That's knowyourriskradio.com. And with that, speaking of Donald Trump's age, let's get to our closing sanity check. I really do think it's... What happened? Why are you cutting sanity check short? Do it again.
Well, you started talking. Sorry. Clicked your face a little too fast.
Let's have it again.
Oh, geez.
Come on, I won't feel right. There it is. Thank you. It didn't feel right. We've had such a good show. I didn't want to end it like that. It is the biggest manipulation for the left to act like they now are concerned about Donald Trump's age. And that's what I won't forgive, is like, ignore Biden's age, ignore his clear mental decline, act like it's not a problem, no big deal, this is the right, this is mean, this is evil. And then, Biden's out, so, now Donald Trump's age is a problem, even though he's still younger than Joe Biden is. Well, now Donald Trump should release his medical records. Donald Trump's not doing that. Well, what is he trying to hide? I mean, the gaslighting. It's absolutely insane, and there is perhaps no worse culprit than the ladies of The View.
The most comprehensive details that are known of Trump's health care are from a nearly 7-year-old report from his physician at the time following a physical exam. This is what we learned. He had high cholesterol. That concerns me. He was overweight, obviously. And he had rosacea. I don't know if I care about that as much.
Rosacea.
But that's the most information that we have about the man that wants to be next to the nuclear codes. I want to know what's going on in his mind, because he's calling it a weave thing that he does. I don't know
sure
what
that
this
doesn't refer to his head?
Nope. He's saying when he's all over the place and talking about different things and jumping around, it's a weave thing that he does, and that means that he's smart. I don't know. That's probably some sort of sign if you look at the stats of dementia or failing cognitive ability.
Well, interesting. So now we're concerned about dementia and failing cognitive ability. Got it. That has been your sanity check for today. That has been today's really fun episode of Undivided. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much for your commitment to giving common sense a comeback. If you have not already, please support our show. It's just $5 a month. Or you can pay more if you want to. Hell, we got a tier that's $250 a month if you're feeling real fancy. undividedpod.com, undividedpod.com. Gosh, anything else? I feel like I'm forgetting something. Try to figure out who the sign-stealing Karen is.
Help us with that.
Because I won't be able to sleep tonight. I'm going to post the video clip. I will not be able to sleep tonight if I don't figure out who that is. Appreciate you guys. See you back here on the live show tomorrow at noon. Boop.